All right, Unit 5 is the post-American Revolution. Basically, it's how America starts to establish themselves when it comes to government and abilities to govern themselves. There's little bits and pieces that shows that not everyone agreed on how to do things, and we'll talk about that. First of all, right after the American Revolution, there wasn't just one capital. They didn't have Washington, D.C. There was actually multiple ones because at the time, during the war, people tried to establish things in each state. So essentially, each state had a constitution or a plan for a republic government. Not everyone had the same one. With 8 different states having drafted a constitution by the end of 1776, it made things a lot more complicated because they wanted that power to extend throughout all of the colonies and states, but everyone had to agree on one. Essentially, their goals were to not place too much power in the hands of one person, and things like Pennsylvania not having a leader meant that they had a 12-person council instead of one person in charge. They also wanted to divide this power between a governor and legislature, so that way even more of an ability to equally control the government and their decisions would happen. Legislature was a bicameral or two-house lawmaking chamber. Those voters were chosen as state legislatures through elections. This is basically the same thing we have now. We have our Democrats and Republicans. Back then, though, it was a little less established. The only issue with this is that many times it was only white males who were older than 21 that could vote. Women, anybody below the age of 21, African Americans, everything like that, they couldn't vote. Only these men, and most of them were actually in charge of things. They had quite a bit of power already. Legislature became the most powerful, and it caused many disagreements, as well as the capital of the nation moving around before setting into D.C. So it was in areas like Boston and Philadelphia, areas that they had put the Second Continental Congress, but there wasn't one town established as the actual capital for America for quite some time. When we had the beginning government, it wasn't just the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. We actually started off what was called the Articles of Confederation. It had a lot of advantages, but most of the time it caused problems. The Second Continental Congress had a committee that created this plan for a new central government around November of 1777. This was established as a weak central government because the states kept most of the power. There was not any sort of chief executive person or a strong legislature that was in charge. No laws could be passed without a 9 out of 13 state vote, so majority. And if they were to change these Articles of Confederation in any way, it had to be a full-out agreement of 1313. Congress themselves had very limited abilities. They could conduct foreign affairs and maintain armed forces. They could borrow money and issue currency, but they couldn't regulate trade. They couldn't force citizens to join the army or impose any sort of taxes. Remember, taxes is a big issue that England used to do on us before the American Revolution. If Congress actually needed any money, they had to ask the states, and the states could say no. So Congress was trying to get things done, but the states were not wanting to spend that money, especially after a war. The only reason this was even passed, the Articles of Confederation, was because New York and Virginia, as well as many other states, gave up land for Western expansion. So they said, yes, we'll agree to this happening for government, but we want to go further west and have more land. These Western lands were owned by America regardless of what was said, but these non-existent legislature people had many times wanted to go west of the Appalachian Mountains after the American Revolution. If you remember, we had an individual who actually fought for this to happen. He killed Indians, he killed people in the colonies, and disagreed quite a bit. The Ordinance of 1785 was a process of surveying and selling that land north of the Ohio River to people who were from the colonies. Most of the time, these pieces that a person would get were 6 miles long and 6 miles wide. The Northwest Ordinance, which was passed in 1787, so 2 years later, was a way to create Northwest Territory north of the Ohio River and east of the Mississippi River, so somewhat in the same area. When the territory had 60,000 residents of 5 smaller territories, and each could take statehood. So we're talking about Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio. This is what we're looking at, the establishment for all of these states. Additionally, the Land Act of 1800 was where a person was required to buy at least 320 acres for $2 per acre. Now this seems very cheap, but back then that was a lot of money. The buyer could buy half of that money and half of that land at the time of purchase, and the rest of it had to be paid in a 4-yearly payment plan. When you add all this together, you can see that what comes about in an event is Shays' Rebellion. With this growing population, once again, America is faced with economic problems. The South was obviously damaged by the war. We had a lot of battles happening down there, not to forget that we had ones in Boston and Philadelphia, as well as New York. When this happens, though, in down south area, this means that prices and crops would actually drop quite a bit. Without this British West Indies market that we had previously for tea and other ways of making living in the States, trade had stopped almost completely, as well as the fact that most of the money that the government had went towards paying those debts to foreign countries like Spain and France that helped us out in the American Revolution. So we made money, but not near as much, and it served different purposes. It didn't help us thrive. Massachusetts, for instance, in 1786, had an issue with the rebellion where farmers were having land seized from their government for not receiving payment. So Daniel Shay, who used to be part of the Continental Army, led 1,200 farmers and supporters towards a federal arsenal in Springfield. Despite being fired at by the state militia, the farmers actually didn't stop, and the militia killing 4 farmers. But in comparison to 1,200, that's nothing major. When it came to the concern of this issue, this rebellion, the government basically saw that they couldn't control unrest and violence because everything was spread out so far and nothing could be done quickly. Additionally, when looking at the issue of slavery in New America, between 1776 and 1786, all states except South Carolina outlawed or taxed slavery for the American Revolution. So we're looking at states north getting rid of it, states south taxing slavery to even happen, where South Carolina didn't move at all. After the war, this meant that slavery existed and was legal in every state. The only difference was that it wasn't a major source of labor in the north like it was in the south. So the north relies on industries as well as different areas of production, but the south requires crops and other types of farming. 1774, Quakers are the one that founded the first American Anti-Slavery Society. 1780, Pennsylvania passed a law for the gradual freeing of slaves. 83 is when Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey did the same to end slavery in their states. So a lot of the North by 1783 was free. The problem was that southern plantation systems relied on slavery to succeed. These are huge farms that have a lot of space and need a lot of labor. So for instance, when we're looking at the idea of making these documents and trying to figure everything out, you've got 1 million people in one room. That it's kind of the idea of nobody is particularly in charge, even though they really like George Washington. Now, when they're trying to establish something a little bit more prominent, like the Constitution, they have the Constitutional Convention. September of 1786, Alexander Hamilton called for the convention to discuss national trade issues. Additionally, he wanted to make sure that they discussed a needs of a union, so to speak, one group of states, not multiple ones with their own type of government. Washington didn't want this convention until after Shays' Rebellion had happened, so this big event happens and these people die. And that's when George Washington thinks it's a good idea because he sees all these problems and how angry people are. These 55 delegates that show up again from the previous Second Continental Congress are people like planters and merchants, lawyers, physicians, generals, governors, and college presidents. And by this point, a fun little fact is that Ben Franklin was at the age of 80, and that's rare for that time period. The convention didn't amend the Articles of Confederation. They actually wrote a completely new constitution. So both of them existed, but at the time, one was more prominent than the other. A man named Gouverneur Morris wrote the final draft of the Constitution, and James Madison was the one that kept record of these events. Delegates decided that each state would have one vote on all questions and decisions and were based on a majority vote. Sessions like this, where they discussed this material, was not open to the public. Now, basically, there's three different ideas that they had. One was the Virginia Plan, which was proposed by Edmund Randolph at the beginning of the convention and was backed up by James Madison. He says that the government should have the power to tax, regulate trade, and veto state laws. Members of both houses would be proportional, so they're the same size and numbers of people. And members of the convention disagreed on this idea, especially because states like Delaware and Virginia were smaller in population, so they wouldn't get near as much proper representation. Next is the New Jersey Plan, which was given out by William Paterson. It would say that one house had each state had one vote. Congress had the power to set these taxes and regulate the trade, and elect the executive branch made up of more than one person. They were only allowed to serve one time, though. Judicial leaders would serve for life, so that's where we're seeing Supreme Court come into place. And it allowed for more powerful people in the federal government, but less in the Virginia Plan. Both plans had a federal system with three branches: legislative, judicial, and executive. We see that today. And they gave the federal government more powers than it had under the Articles of Confederation. The Great Compromise and Three-Fifths Compromise come along because nobody could agree on either the Virginia Plan or New Jersey. So Roger Sherman has this idea that they can compromise between the Senate and House of Representatives. Essentially, the Senate, which was the upper house, the one that's larger and more important, would have 2 members per state, and the House of Representatives would be based on population, which is exactly what we do today. Three-fifths compromise, so we've got 2 pieces of legislation again, says that not only are we setting up government, but because of the disagreement with slavery between the North and South, this meant that slavery had an idea for congressional members, even though they disagreed, and it could count towards population. So it's a 3/5 compromise because they're saying 3 out of 5 slaves counted towards the population. When they finalized the Constitution and Bill of Rights, Virginia and Massachusetts are good examples of states with early listings of Declaration of Rights or Bill of Rights. So they already had their own. They were giving up their own for a large federal one. Many of these members worried that without the Declaration of Rights and government, that they might abuse power, and it was defied. Instead of the Constitution being carefully and thoroughly thought out and wrote out, 2 delegates from Virginia and 1 from Massachusetts completely refused to sign the Constitution until they added the Bill of Rights. So making sure that we had a government, but we had abilities for the government to not do things. And again, the Constitution was signed on December 7th of 1787, 4 months after it began. So it took them 4 months to actually write the Constitution and then add the Bill of Rights. The Constitution created federalism. It got rid of the Articles of Confederation, which gave power mainly to states and not the government, although it still distributed that power in certain ways. The federal government had tax power, regulating trade, controlling currency, raise an army, declare war, and we're seeing that this supreme law of the land, or no state could make laws and tax actions without talking and looking at the Constitution. When we go to state power, they could control trade within their borders and set up local governments and schools, as well as establish their marriage or divorce ideas. They shared powers between these 2 bodies for taxing citizens and controlling the established criminal justice system. 3 branches of government include the Article 1 legislative branch, Article 2 executive branch, and Article 3 judicial branch. The first one is where we see the House of Representatives and Congress. The second is where we see the president, vice president, and his or her electoral college. And the judicial branch is the Supreme Court. Last, we have Federalists versus Anti-Federalists. A Federalist supports this Constitution, like George Washington and Ben Franklin, and they would write essays that would be sent to men at the state conventions in favor of this. An Anti-Federalist is someone who thinks that the government will take away American liberties, and they want to ignore the will of the states and favor the wealthy. The government, they thought, would do this. They also favored local government.